David pulled his cargo hauler into docking bay 7 with practiced ease. The magnetic clamps engaged with a solid thunk that vibrated through the ship's hull. He powered down the engines and checked his manifest one more time. 40 tons of medical supplies bound for the outer colonies. Nothing exciting, nothing dangerous. Just another routine delivery to Orbital Station Meridian. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the airlock. The station's artificial gravity felt different from his ship's systems, slightly heavier and with a subtle wobble that told him the gravity generators needed maintenance. The air tasted recycled and stale, mixed with the smell of fuel and unwashed bodies that came with any trading hub. Meridian sat at the crossroads of 3 major shipping lanes, making it a natural stopping point for traders from dozens of species. The main corridor stretched out before him, lined with shops selling everything from spare parts to exotic foods. Alien voices chattered in languages he didn't recognize, mixing with the universal translator's mechanical interpretations. David had been making runs like this for 5 years now. After leaving his old job, the quiet life of a cargo pilot suited him well. No stress, no deadlines that meant life or death, no watching his back every second. Just him, his ship, and the endless routes between the stars. He made his way toward the cargo office to file his delivery papers. A group of Gorvan mercenaries lounged near the entrance to Bay 12. David recognized the species immediately. 8 feet tall, covered in thick gray scales with arms like tree trunks and claws that could tear through steel plating. They wore mismatched armor and carried weapons that had seen better days. Typical hired muscle looking for easy work. The largest one, clearly their leader, watched David approach with small yellow eyes. A scar ran from his left temple down to his jaw, giving him an even more menacing appearance. The other 3 shifted position as David walked past, forming a loose semicircle. David kept walking, his face neutral. "Human," the scarred one called out. His voice sounded like gravel in a cement mixer. David stopped and turned around slowly. "Can I help you?" The Gorvan stepped closer, his boots making heavy sounds on the metal deck plating. "You can help us, yes. New faces pay station tax. Old custom." David looked around the corridor. Other traders had suddenly found reasons to be somewhere else. A few shopkeepers were pulling down their security shutters. Even the station security guards who usually patrolled this area were nowhere to be seen. "Station tax?" David asked. "That's interesting. I've been coming here for 3 years and nobody mentioned any tax before." The Gorvan's companions laughed, showing rows of sharp teeth. The leader cracked his knuckles, a sound like breaking wood. "Maybe you know pay attention before. Maybe you need lesson in paying attention." David sighed and set down his data pad. "Look, I'm just here to deliver cargo and refuel. I don't want any trouble." "Trouble?" The scarred Gorvan took another step forward. "No trouble if you pay. Simple business, so how much? Everything in your pockets. Plus whatever you got in ship cargo hold that looks valuable." David shook his head. "That's not going to happen." The other 3 Gorgons moved closer, boxing him in against the corridor wall. The leader reached out with one massive hand, fingers spread wide enough to crush a human skull. "Maybe you know understand," he said, his yellow eyes gleaming. "We no ask, we tell. You give or we take." David looked up at the towering alien. At 8 feet tall, the Gorvan outweighed him by at least 200 pounds. His scales looked thick enough to stop small arms fire, and those claws could probably cut through his jacket like paper. "I understand perfectly," David said quietly, "but I'm asking you nicely. Don't grab me." The scarred Gorvan's laugh boomed through the corridor. His companions joined in, slapping their knees and pointing at the small human who thought he could make demands. "You hear that?" the leader called to his friends. "Little human says don't grab him. Maybe he'd bite us with tiny human teeth." More laughter. One of the other Gorgons made exaggerated fearful gestures, pretending to cower from David's threatening presence. "Seriously," David said, his voice still calm. "Just walk away. Find someone else to bother." The laughter got louder. The scarred Gorvan leaned down until his face was level with David's, his breath smelling like rotting meat. "Or what, little human? You call for help? Look around. No help coming. Just you and us, an empty corridor." David glanced around one more time. The corridor was indeed empty. The emergency cameras tracked their movement, but he knew station security wouldn't respond quickly. By the time help arrived, it would be too late for help to matter. "Last chance," he said, meeting the Gorvan's yellow stare without flinching. "Walk away." The alien's hand shot out toward David's shoulder, claws extended. I think we done talking, human. David closed his eyes for just a moment. When he opened them again, something had changed. The slight tension in his shoulders was gone. His breathing had slowed. His hands hung loose at his sides, but his weight had shifted slightly onto the balls of his feet. The scarred Gorvan's claws closed around David's jacket. The alien's grip was strong enough to lift a grown human off the ground without effort. He began to pull David closer, probably planning to slam him against the wall a few times to make his point clear. There, the Gorvan said with satisfaction. Now we understand each other better. David looked up at him with an expression that should have been a warning. It was the look of someone who had tried to avoid this moment, but now accepted what had to happen. Cold, professional, and completely without fear. Yeah, David said quietly. I think we do. The other three Gorgons were still laughing, making jokes about human weakness and discussing how they would split up David's cargo. They didn't notice their leader's expression starting to change as he looked into David's eyes and began to realize that something was very wrong. The scarred Gorvan's grip tightened on David's jacket, his claws starting to tear through the fabric. In 7 minutes, he would be dead. In 7 minutes, all 4 of them would be dead. But right now, they still thought they were the predators, and David was just another helpless human traitor who had wandered into the wrong place at the wrong time. They had made the mistake that so many others had made before them. They had grabbed the human. David had warned them not to. Brutok tightened his grip on the human's jacket and felt the satisfaction that came with easy prey. Humans were always the same. They talked tough until someone actually grabbed them. Then they folded like cheap metal. He had been hunting in these shipping lanes for 15 years, ever since he left his homeworld with nothing but stolen weapons and 3 loyal packmates. In all that time, he had learned to read every species that traveled the trade routes. Humans were soft targets. Weak bones, thin skin, no natural weapons, and worst of all, they always tried to negotiate instead of fight. Kresh, he called to his second-in-command, a lean Gorvan with acid burns covering half his face. Remember that human traitor we caught last month near the asteroid fields? Kresh's scarred face twisted into what passed for a smile among their kind. The one who offered us his entire cargo manifest if we let him keep his ship? That's the one. Begged like a hatching, just like this one will. The other 2 pack members, brothers named Vorth and Gorth, moved closer to watch the show. They had done this dance hundreds of times. Corner the prey, make the threats, collect the payment, move on to the next victim. Sometimes the prey fought back, which made things more interesting. But humans never fought back. They were too smart for their own good, always calculating odds and looking for the safe way out. Brutok studied the human's face, looking for the signs of breaking that always came. Fear in the eyes, sweat on the forehead, the slight trembling that meant their weak nervous systems were overloading. But this human just stared back at him with an expression Brutok couldn't quite read. You know what I think about your species? Brutok asked, lifting the human slightly off the ground. The human's feet barely touched the deck plating. I think you evolved wrong. All brain, no body. Like insects that got too smart for their own good. The human didn't respond. That was unusual. Most species had something to say when Brutok started his intimidation speeches. They either begged or threatened or tried to bargain. This one just hung there like a piece of cargo. Humans spread across the galaxy like a disease. Brutok continued, warming to his favorite topic. No claws, no scales, no poison, no natural armor. How did you even survive on your homeworld? What kind of deathworld produces prey animals that think they're predators? Kresh laughed at that. Maybe their world had no real dangers. Maybe they never learned to be afraid. Oh, they learned, Brutok said, giving the human a shake that would have dislocated most species' shoulders. They just learned to be afraid of the wrong things. They fear death but not pain. They fear losing their cargo but not losing their lives. The human's jacket was starting to tear under Brutok's claws. Good. A little property damage would help make the point. Humans were attached to their possessions in ways that more practical species found amusing. Borth spoke up from behind them. Brother, remember the human colony ship we raided 5 years ago? Which one? Gorth asked. We hit 3 of them that season. The one with the families. The younglings hid behind their parents like the parents could actually protect them. All 4 Gorgons found that hilarious. The idea of human parents trying to defend their offspring against real predators was absurd. What were they going to do? Throw their primitive tools and hope for the best? Brutok had read the intelligence reports on human military capabilities. They had decent starships and clever tactics, but in personal combat they were hopeless. Their soldiers needed powered armor just to be effective against other humans, let alone against species that had evolved for war. The funny thing about humans, Brutok said, still holding his captive off the ground, is that they think being smart makes them dangerous. They build their little weapons and their little ships and they think that makes them warriors. He leaned closer to the human's face, near enough to see his own reflection in the human's dark eyes. But when you take away their toys, what's left? Weak muscles, soft skin, bones that break if you look at them wrong. The human still hadn't said anything. That was starting to annoy Brutok. Part of the fun was hearing them beg or make threats they couldn't back up. This one just stared at him like he was looking at something mildly interesting. "Cat got your tongue, human?" Brutok asked. The translation system made the idiom come out as something about predators stealing vocal cords, but the meaning carried through. "No more brave words?" Finally the human spoke. "I already said everything I needed to say." Brutok blinked in confusion. "What? I warned you not to grab me. You grabbed me anyway. Now we're past the talking part." That made Brutok laugh again. "Past the talking part? What comes next, human? You going to hurt me with your soft little hands?" Something like that. The human's voice was perfectly calm, like he was discussing cargo manifests or fuel prices. There was no anger in it, no fear, no desperation. Just a flat statement of fact that somehow made Brutok's scales itch in a way he didn't understand. Kresh noticed the change in his leader's mood. "Something wrong, Brutok?" Brutok studied the human's face more carefully. He had seen that expression before, but not on prey animals. He had seen it on other predators, the really dangerous ones. The ones who didn't waste energy on threats or posturing because they knew exactly what they were capable of. But that was impossible. This was just a human. A cargo pilot with soft hands and civilian clothes. The intelligence reports were clear about human physical capabilities. They were near the bottom of the galactic scale for personal combat effectiveness. "Nothing's wrong," Brutok said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Just thinking about how much this one's cargo might be worth, the human was still staring at him with those dark eyes. There was something in that gaze that Brutok's predator instincts were trying to warn him about, but his rational mind rejected the warning. This was a human. Humans were prey. That was simply how the galaxy worked. Gorth had moved around behind the human, probably planning to search his pockets while Brutok held him. "Should we take him somewhere more private?" "This corridor gets traffic." "Good idea," Brutok said. The sooner they finished this, the better. Something about this human was making him uncomfortable in ways he couldn't explain. "Bay 12 is empty. We can work there without interruptions." He started dragging the human toward the empty docking bay, his claws still tangled in the torn jacket. The human didn't resist, didn't try to grab onto door frames or call for help. He just let himself be dragged along like a piece of cargo. That should have been reassuring. Cooperative prey made the job easier. But something in the back of Brutok's mind kept insisting that this was wrong, that he was missing something important. As they reached the entrance to Bay 12, Brutok made a decision that would haunt his final moments. Instead of listening to his instincts, he decided to trust the intelligence reports about human physical capabilities. It was the last mistake he would ever make. Brutok dragged David into the empty docking bay and threw him against the wall. The human hit the metal plating with a sound that should have broken ribs, then slid down to the floor. Bay 12 was perfect for their needs. No cameras, no witnesses, and the thick walls would muffle any noise. "Now we do business properly," Brutok said, cracking his knuckles again. Behind him, his 3 packmates spread out to block the exits. Standard procedure for dangerous prey, though none of them expected a human to be dangerous. David pushed himself up from the floor, moving slowly like someone who had been hurt by the impact. Good. Brutok preferred his prey softened up a little before the real negotiation started. "Pockets first," Kresh said, stepping forward with his sidearm drawn. "Then we see what toys your ship might have." David straightened up and looked around the bay. Empty cargo containers lined the walls. Maintenance equipment hung from overhead tracks. Support beams created shadows in the corners where station lighting didn't quite reach. "This will do," David said quietly. Brutok frowned. "What will do?" "This location. It's isolated, soundproof, and easy to clean afterward." The 4 Gorgons exchanged glances. That wasn't the kind of thing prey animals usually said. Forth took a step closer, his weapon ready. "Clean what afterward?" he asked. David looked directly at Brutok. The blood. What happened next took 30 seconds. David moved sideways and forward at the same time, his body low and his hands reaching for something that wasn't there, until suddenly it was. A piece of maintenance equipment, sharp-edged and heavy, flew through the air and caught Gorth in the throat. The Gorvin's scream cut off mid-sound as his windpipe collapsed. Brutok's brain tried to process what he was seeing, but David was already moving again. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Every step calculated and precise. This wasn't how humans moved. This wasn't how prey animals moved. Kresh fired his sidearm, but David wasn't where the weapon was pointing. He had rolled behind a cargo container, come up on Kresh's blind side, and done something to the Gorvin's neck that made a wet snapping sound. Kresh dropped like a stone. 2 down in 30 seconds. Forth was backing toward the exit, his own weapon raised and his yellow eyes wide with something Gorgons rarely felt. Fear. Brutok. This isn't right. Humans don't move like that. Brutok agreed, but agreeing wouldn't bring his packmates back to life. He drew his own sidearm, a military-grade plasma rifle that could punch through starship armor. Whatever this human was, high-energy plasma would stop him. David stepped out from behind the cargo container, completely calm. A thin line of green Gorvin blood decorated his jacket where Kresh had managed to scratch him while dying. "You're not a cargo pilot," Brutok said, his weapon trained on David's center mass. "I am now," David replied, "but I used to be other things." "What other things?" "The kind of things that governments don't talk about in public." Brutok's finger found the trigger, but David was talking and moving at the same time, using words as a distraction while his body shifted into positions that shouldn't have been threatening, but somehow were. "You know what's funny about intelligence reports?" David asked, taking a step closer. "They only tell you what people want you to know." Another step. Brutok should have fired, but something about David's movement pattern was hypnotic, like watching a natural predator stalk its prey. "The reports say humans are physically weak," David continued. "They say we can't match the combat capabilities of warrior species. They say we're better suited for support roles and technical positions." A third step. Brutok was the experienced fighter, but every combat instinct he possessed was screaming at him to run. This human moved like death given form. "The reports are mostly true," David said. "Most humans really are better with tools than with their hands. Most humans really do prefer negotiation to violence, but not you," Brutok managed. "But not me." David's next step brought him within arm's reach of the plasma rifle's barrel. That should have been suicide. At that range, even a near miss would be fatal. "My government spent a lot of money teaching me to kill things," David said conversationally. "Lots of different things. Big things, small things, smart things, stupid things. Things with scales, things with fur, things with exoskeletons." Brutok tried to pull the trigger, but his hand wouldn't obey. Some deep part of his brain recognized what he was looking at and refused to let him make any sudden movements that might trigger a predator response. "Things like you," David finished. He moved. Brutok had seen combat in a dozen systems against half a dozen species. He had fought pirates, rebels, and competing mercenary groups. He considered himself a professional warrior with reflexes honed by years of conflict. He might as well have been a statue. David's hand closed over the plasma rifle's barrel and twisted it aside. The weapon discharged into the bay's ceiling, melting through metal support beams and filling the air with the smell of vaporized steel. Before Brutok could recover his balance, David's other hand had found a pressure point in his neck that sent lightning bolts of pain through his nervous system. The Gorvin dropped to his knees, temporarily paralyzed. The plasma rifle clattered across the deck plating out of reach. "Forth," Brutok gasped, calling to his remaining packmate. "Run," but Forth was already running. The exit door cycled open, and the surviving Gorvin disappeared into the corridor beyond, his heavy footsteps echoing off the walls. David knelt beside Brutok, his expression clinical. "He won't get far. Station security will pick him up in the main corridor." "How?" Brutok asked through gritted teeth. The paralysis was wearing off, but the pain remained. "Because I sent them a message 3 minutes ago while you were making speeches about human weakness." Brutok tried to focus on David's face. "What message?" "That there were 4 armed Gorgons robbing traders in Bay 12. that they were threatening to kill anyone who tried to stop them. David's voice remained perfectly calm, that they had taken a human hostage. The implications hit Brutok like a physical blow. You planned this. I tried to avoid it. You wouldn't listen. The paralysis. How long? Another minute or two. Long enough. Brutok's vision started to blur around the edges. Long enough for what? David stood up and walked over to retrieve the plasma rifle. Long enough for you to understand that the intelligence reports missed something important. What? Humans don't just adapt to our environment, David said, checking the weapon's power settings. We adapt to our enemies. The last thing Brutok saw was the plasma rifle's muzzle swinging toward his face. The last thing he heard was David's voice, still perfectly calm. You grabbed me, David said. I warned you not to do that. 7 minutes after the confrontation began, 4 Gorgons lay dead in Bay 12. David was already cleaning the blood from his hands when station security finally arrived. Station Security Chief Reyes arrived at Bay 12 with a full tactical team, expecting to find a hostage situation, or possibly a human corpse. What she found instead was David Chen sitting calmly on a cargo container, using a cleaning cloth to wipe green blood from his knuckles. 4 dead Gorgons lay scattered around the bay like broken toys. Holy Mother of Stars, muttered Sergeant Williams, her second in command. His hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm before stopping. David showed no signs of being a threat to anyone else. Reyes had been running security on Meridian for 8 years. She had seen gang wars, pirate raids, and more bar fights than she could count, but she had never seen anything quite like this. The Gorgons weren't just dead. They had been taken apart with surgical precision by someone who knew exactly how their anatomy worked. Mr. Chen, she said carefully, her own weapon remaining holstered. Are you injured? David looked up from cleaning his hands. Minor scratches. Nothing serious. Can you tell me what happened here? 4 Gorgons attempted to rob me in Corridor 7. When I refused to comply, they dragged me here. I defended myself. Reyes walked slowly around the bay, studying the scene. Gorth lay near the entrance with his throat crushed by a piece of maintenance equipment. Kresh was crumpled against the far wall, his neck bent at an impossible angle. Vorth had made it halfway to the exit, before something had caught him from behind and opened his carotid artery. Brutok sat slumped against a cargo container. A neat hole burned through his skull by his own plasma rifle. Defended yourself, Reyes repeated, against 4 armed Gorgons. That's correct. She had read David's file when he first registered for trading privileges 3 years ago. Cargo pilot, clean record, no outstanding warrants. But files could be incomplete, and sometimes they were deliberately misleading. Mr. Chen, I need to ask you some questions for my report. Are you willing to cooperate with our investigation? Of course. Williams approached one of the bodies, his scanner already active. Chief, take a look at this. The wounds are too clean, too precise. This wasn't a lucky amateur defending himself. Someone trained this guy. Reyes nodded. She had reached the same conclusion. Mr. Chen, what's your background prior to becoming a cargo pilot? I worked for my government in various capacities. What kind of capacities? David finished cleaning his hands and set the cloth aside. The kind that aren't discussed in public. That told Reyes everything she needed to know. Every species had their black operations specialists, the ones who did the jobs that officially never happened. Humans were supposed to be bad at that kind of work, but the evidence scattered around Bay 12 suggested otherwise. I see, she said, and these Gorgons just happened to pick the wrong target. I tried to warn them. Williams was scanning Brutok's body with his forensic equipment. Chief, the plasma burns are perfectly placed. Center of the forehead angled to cause immediate brain death. No hesitation, no wasted shots. How long did this take? Reyes asked. David checked his chronometer. About 7 minutes from start to finish. 7 minutes. Reyes looked around the bay again. 4 professional mercenaries, all dead in 7 minutes. They weren't professionals, David said quietly. Professionals would have done their research. That sent a chill down Reyes's spine. If David considered these 4 to be amateurs, what would he classify as a real threat? Her comm unit buzzed with an incoming message. She glanced at the display and frowned. Mr. Chen, according to our records, you sent a distress call about armed Gorgons threatening traders. I did. The timestamp shows you sent that message before the confrontation moved to this bay. David nodded. I anticipated their likely course of action based on their behavioral patterns. Williams looked up from his scanning. You mean you knew they were going to drag you somewhere private? It was the logical next step. Threaten in public, follow through in private. Standard intimidation protocol. Reyes was beginning to understand what had really happened here. So you let them bring you here. This location offered tactical advantages, isolated multiple escape routes, plenty of improvised weapons available. You turned it into a killing ground. Turned it into a place where I could resolve the situation without endangering civilians. The distinction was important, Reyes realized. David hadn't lured the Gorgons here for revenge or pleasure. He had chosen the battlefield to minimize collateral damage. That suggested training and discipline, not bloodlust. Her comm unit buzzed again. This time the message made her raise her eyebrows. Mr. Chen, I'm getting reports from other traders. Apparently, word of this incident is already spreading through the station. News travels fast on a trading hub. The interesting thing is how the story is being told. Most species seem to think you got lucky, but a few of the smarter ones are asking different questions. David didn't respond to that, but Reyes saw something flicker across his face. Not concern exactly, but awareness that his situation had become more complicated. Williams had finished his scans and was comparing the results to his database. Chief, I've got something interesting. The combat techniques used here match patterns from several unsolved incidents in this sector over the past 5 years. What kind of incidents? Pirates disappearing. Slavers found dead in their own ships. Mercenary groups that just vanished without explanation. Reyes looked at David with new understanding. You've been busy. I'm a cargo pilot, David said. Sometimes cargo routes go through dangerous areas, and sometimes dangerous people don't survive the encounter. Sometimes, the tactical team had finished securing the scene and was preparing to remove the bodies. Reyes made a decision that would affect her career and possibly her life. Mr. Chen, I'm going to classify this as justified self-defense. 4 armed assailants attempted robbery. You defended yourself. Case closed. David studied her face. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm also going to recommend that you consider changing your route schedule. Why? Because by tomorrow morning half the galaxy is going to know that a human cargo pilot killed 4 Gorvan mercenaries in hand-to-hand combat. Some people are going to want to test whether you can do it again. David stood up from the cargo container, his movement fluid and controlled. And the other half? The other half are going to realize that maybe humans aren't as harmless as everyone thought. As David walked toward the exit, Reyes called after him. One more question. How many others are there? David paused at the door. Others? Humans like you. The kind that governments don't talk about. David was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Reyes wish he hadn't asked. Enough, he said simply, and walked away. Reyes stood alone in Bay 12, surrounded by the bodies of 4 professional killers who had made the mistake of underestimating their prey. In a few hours, her report would be filed and the incident would officially be closed. But she had the feeling that the real consequences were just beginning. 3 days after the incident at Meridian Station, Commander Thrix of the Callan Intelligence Service received a report that made him read the same paragraph 4 times. He set down his morning stimulant and called for his aide. Get me everything we have on human military capabilities, he ordered. And I mean everything. Not just the public reports. The aide, a young Callan named Zareth, hesitated. Sir, should I include the classified assessments? Especially those. Thrix had been analyzing galactic military threats for 20 years. In all that time, humans had barely registered on his danger scale. They were clever engineers and decent pilots, but their physical limitations made them unsuitable for serious combat roles. Every intelligence service in known space agreed on that assessment, but 4 dead Gorgons suggested that assessment might be wrong. The data files arrived within an hour, delivered by encrypted courier. Thrix spread them across his desk and began reading. What he found made his stomach turn cold. Most of the reports confirmed what everyone already knew. Humans were physically weaker than most galactic species. Their bones were brittle, their muscles were underdeveloped, and they lacked natural weapons like claws or poison. In direct physical confrontation, an average human would lose to an average member of almost any other spacefaring race. But buried in the classified sections were other details. Humans had an unusually high tolerance for pain. They could function effectively even when seriously injured. Their endurance was remarkable, allowing them to maintain combat effectiveness much longer than expected. And their capacity for tactical thinking under stress was among the highest ever recorded. More disturbing were the gaps in the data. Several human colony worlds had military training facilities, but their specific programs were classified even from allied governments. Human special forces units existed, but their numbers, capabilities, and deployment patterns were state secrets. Thrix's secure communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. The sender was Admiral Korvex leaned forward. Explain. Dr. Van pulled up a holographic display showing comparative anatomy charts. Look at human evolutionary history. Their homeworld was a death trap. Predators, diseases, environmental disasters that wiped out most other species. Humans survived by being adaptable, cooperative, and above all, deceptive. She highlighted several data points on the display. Every other species that achieved spaceflight did so through strength, intelligence, or natural advantages. Humans did it through misdirection. They convinced their predators they weren't threats until they had developed weapons that made the question irrelevant. You're saying they're naturally deceptive? Thrix asked. I'm saying they're naturally strategic. Look at their first contact protocols. They approached every species as potential allies, emphasizing trade and cooperation. They downplayed their military capabilities and focused on technical assistance. Classic misdirection. Admiral Korvex studied the data with growing concern. How long have they been doing this? Since they left their home system. Maybe longer. Dr. Van switched to a new display showing human expansion patterns. They've been establishing trade routes and diplomatic relationships for decades, building trust, gathering intelligence, positioning themselves as harmless merchants and engineers. While secretly training soldiers like Chen, Thrix concluded, not just soldiers, think bigger. What if Chen isn't special forces? What if he's just a cargo pilot who happened to have military training? How many human traders, engineers, and diplomats might have similar backgrounds? The implications hit all three of them at the same time. If humans had been systematically placing trained operatives throughout galactic society, while maintaining a facade of peaceful weakness, they had achieved the most successful intelligence penetration in galactic history. Thrix's communication system chimed again. This time the message came from Agent Vex of the Syndicate, one of the galaxy's most effective information brokers. Commander Thrix. Vex's synthesized voice carried an unusual tone of urgency. I have information about the human situation that you need to hear. Go ahead. I've been tracking financial records for human trading companies. The patterns are strange. Too much money moving through too many channels for simple cargo operations. What kind of money? The kind that funds intelligence operations. Dead drops, safe houses, equipment purchases, payment for informants. The humans have been running a shadow economy alongside their legitimate trade networks. Admiral Korvex interrupted. How extensive? Galaxy-wide. Every major trading hub, every diplomatic station, every military installation that allows civilian contractors. The humans have people there, and those people have resources. Dr. Van nodded grimly. It fits the pattern. They've been using their reputation as harmless traders to build the most extensive spy network in galactic history. But why? Thrix asked. What's their endgame? Before anyone could answer, Thrix's aide burst into the room without waiting for permission. Sir, you need to see this immediately. The aide activated the main display screen showing a news feed from the Galactic Broadcasting Network. The headline made Thrix's blood run cold. Human cargo pilot kills 4 armed mercenaries in self-defense. But it wasn't the headline that worried him. It was the reporter's analysis that followed. While officials are calling this an isolated incident, the reporter said, military experts are beginning to question long-held assumptions about human capabilities. Several governments have quietly begun reviewing their intelligence assessments on human military strength. The screen switched to an interview with a hegemony military analyst. If this David Chen is representative of typical human capability, we may need to completely revise our understanding of human society. The question isn't whether they're dangerous. The question is how dangerous they've been all along. Thrix turned off the display and looked at his colleagues. Gentlemen, Dr. Van, I think we have a problem. Agreed, Admiral Korvex said. The question is what we do about it. Dr. Van was studying her data charts with a troubled expression. There's something else we should consider. If humans have been hiding their true capabilities for this long, there must be a reason. They're not a naturally aggressive species despite their deceptive nature, so why maintain such an elaborate facade? Maybe they're preparing for something, Agent Vex suggested through the comm link. Or maybe, Thrix said quietly, they're protecting themselves from something they saw coming that the rest of us missed. The room fell silent as that possibility sank in. If humans had been secretly preparing for a threat that other species hadn't recognized, what did that say about human intelligence capabilities? And what did it say about the threat itself? 3 hours later, similar conversations were taking place in intelligence centers across the galaxy. The death of 4 Gorvan mercenaries had started a chain reaction that would fundamentally change how every species viewed humanity. David Chen, meanwhile, was 3 systems away from Meridian, delivering medical supplies to a mining colony and trying to pretend his life hadn't just become infinitely more complicated. He was about to discover that pretending wouldn't be enough. Arvex of the Hegemony Fleet, one of the most respected military minds in the galaxy. Commander, Corvex's image appeared on the screen, his reptilian features showing unusual concern. Have you seen the reports from Meridian Station? I'm reviewing them now, Admiral. What's your assessment? Thrix chose his words carefully. Either this David Chen is a remarkable anomaly, or our intelligence on human capabilities is dangerously incomplete. I was afraid you would say that. Corvex shifted in his command chair. I've been making discreet inquiries with other intelligence services. The Gorvan Confederacy is particularly upset about this incident. Upset enough to take action? They've put a bounty on Chen's head. 50,000 credits for proof of his death. That was a substantial sum, enough to attract serious attention from bounty hunters across the sector. Thrix made a note to monitor Chen's movements. There's something else, Corvex continued. I ran a statistical analysis on mysterious deaths among pirates and mercenaries in this region over the past 5 years. The pattern is interesting. How so? Violent criminals operating near human trade routes have a mortality rate 30% higher than elsewhere. The deaths appear unrelated, but they all share certain characteristics. Professional execution, minimal evidence, no witnesses. Thrix felt his scales prickle with unease. You think there are others like Chen? I think Chen might not be unique at all. I think he might be part of a larger program that we've completely failed to detect. The conversation was interrupted by another incoming message. This one from a source Thrix hadn't heard from in years. Dr. Alicia Van, the galaxy's leading expert on comparative xenobiology, appeared on a secondary screen. Gentlemen, she said without preamble, I've been following the discussion about the Meridian incident through intelligence channels. You're asking the wrong questions. Dr. Van, Thrix acknowledged. What questions should we be asking? Not whether humans can be dangerous in combat. That's already been answered. The question is why they've been hiding it so effectively. Admiral Coe. 6 weeks after the Meridian incident, David was loading cargo at Frontier Station when he noticed the change. Conversation stopped when he walked past. Alien traders watched him from the corners of their eyes. Even the station staff treated him with a careful politeness that hadn't been there before. The story had spread faster than he had expected. What started as local gossip had become galactic news, then legend, then something approaching myth. Each retelling had added new details, most of them wrong. Some versions had him killing a dozen Gorgons. Others claimed he was part of a secret human military unit. A few suggested he wasn't entirely human at all. David finished his cargo manifest and headed for the station cantina. He needed information about his next route, and cantinas were where traders gathered to share news and warnings about dangerous systems. The cantina fell silent when he walked in. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned toward him. Species that had never paid attention to humans before studied him like he was some kind of exotic predator. David walked to the bar and ordered a simple meal. The Valerian bartender, a normally chatty being who usually complained about the weather and the station's recycling systems, served him in complete silence. At a corner table, 3 Callan merchants were having a heated discussion in low voices. David's enhanced hearing caught fragments of their conversation. Not natural for humans to move like that. Intelligence. Reports must be wrong. How many more are there? A young Civrian approached his table, moving with the careful respect usually reserved for dangerous predators. "Excuse me, are you David Chen?" David looked up from his meal. "That's me." The Civrian's translator struggled with the words. "Is it true what they say? About the Gorgons?" "Some of it. Which parts?" David considered his answer carefully. The story had grown in the telling, but the core facts remained accurate. "I defended myself against 4 armed attackers." "That part's true." The Civrian nodded slowly. "My cousin trades the Outer Rim routes. He says human merchants there are different now, more confident, like they know something the rest of us don't." That was interesting news. David filed it away for later consideration. "Different how?" "They don't avoid trouble like they used to. Last month, a pirate crew tried to board a human cargo ship. The pirates never reported back." Before David could respond, a commotion near the cantina entrance caught everyone's attention. Captain Marcus Webb, another human trader, walked in with his usual relaxed stride. But David noticed the subtle changes. Marcus moved with better awareness of his surroundings. His jacket hung differently, suggesting body armor underneath. His hands stayed clear of his pockets, ready for action. Marcus spotted David and walked over, ignoring the stares from other patrons. "Mind if I sit?" "Go ahead." Marcus settled into the opposite chair and ordered a drink. When the bartender moved away, he leaned forward and spoke quietly. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest, my friend." "So I've noticed. It's not just the attention from aliens. Earth Command has been asking questions. Discreet questions, but questions." David had been expecting this. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggests they're wondering whether their unofficial retirement program has been as unofficial as they thought." That confirmed David's suspicions. He wasn't the only former special operations soldier who had transitioned to civilian life in the outer systems. Earth's government had quietly encouraged such transitions, thinking that scattered ex-military personnel would be less noticeable than formal military units. They had been wrong about the less noticeable part. "How many of us are there?" David asked. Marcus shrugged. "More than the aliens think. Fewer than they're starting to fear." A new voice interrupted their conversation. "Gentlemen, may I join you?" They looked up to see Dr. Sarah Kim, a human xenobiologist who worked for the Galactic Science Consortium. She was also, David suspected, something more than just a scientist. "Dr. Kim," Marcus said with genuine warmth, "please sit." Sarah pulled up a chair and activated a small privacy shield that would scramble listening devices. "We need to talk. All of us. About what?" "About the fact that our cover is blown and we need to decide what comes next." David raised an eyebrow. "Our cover? Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. Earth's been running the most successful intelligence operation in galactic history. Scattered personnel, minimal official connections, maximum deniability. It worked perfectly until you had to go and kill 4 Gorgons in broad daylight. They didn't give me much choice." "I'm not criticizing your actions," Sarah said quickly. "You did what you had to do. But now the whole galaxy is asking questions we're not ready to answer." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "What kind of questions?" Sarah activated a holographic display, showing intelligence reports from a dozen different species. "Every major government is reassessing human capabilities. Some are panicking. Others are getting suspicious. A few are starting to connect dots we really didn't want connected." The display showed shipping manifests, financial records, and personnel files, all human, all showing patterns that suggested coordination and planning beyond simple commercial activity. "They're figuring it out," David realized. "Faster than we hoped. The Callan Intelligence Service has identified 43 humans in positions that could be intelligence-gathering roles. The Hegemony Fleet has begun tracking human ship movements for strategic patterns. Even the Gorvan Confederacy is asking why so many of their criminal operations have suffered mysterious setbacks near human trade routes." Marcus studied the data with professional interest. "How long before they put it all together?" "They already have. The question is what they plan to do about it." David's enhanced hearing picked up another conversation from across the cantina. 2 hegemony officers were discussing human cargo schedules and wondering aloud whether those schedules might be cover for military reconnaissance. "We're blown," he said quietly. "Completely," Sarah agreed. "But that might not be entirely bad. How do you figure?" Sarah smiled, and for the first time David saw the steel beneath her scientist facade. "Because now they know we're here. Now they know we've been watching. And now they have to decide whether they want us as friends or enemies. She gestured toward the cantina's other patrons, most of whom were still stealing glances at their table. Look around. Half of them are terrified. The other half are trying to figure out how to profit from the situation, but none of them are talking about attacking human colonies or ships anymore. Marcus nodded slowly. Fear breeds respect, and respect breeds cooperation. The galaxy just learned that humans aren't as helpless as everyone thought. That changes the entire balance of power. David looked around the cantina one more time. The conversations had resumed, but the tone was different now. More cautious, more respectful. The casual dismissal of human capabilities was gone, replaced by uncertainty and wariness. A young Zalarian trader approached their table, moving with obvious nervousness. "Excuse me, are you the one they call the Peacekeeper?" David frowned. "The what?" "The Peacekeeper. That's what they're calling you in the Outer Rim. The human who keeps the peace by making troublemakers disappear." Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. David's story was still growing in the telling, but now it was taking on mythic proportions. "I'm just a cargo pilot," David said. The Zalarian nodded eagerly. "That's what they all say. The peaceful ones who are more dangerous than they look." As the young trader walked away, Sarah leaned forward with an expression David couldn't quite read. "He's not wrong, you know, about what you've become." "What do you mean? You're not just David Chen anymore. You're proof that humans are more than we pretend to be. You're a warning to anyone who thinks they can push us around." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You're a symbol." David finished his meal and stood up. "I never wanted to be a symbol. None of us did. But that's what we are now. The question is what we do with it." As David walked toward the exit, the cantina's conversation shifted to follow his movement. He heard fragments of discussion in a dozen languages, all focused on the same themes. Human capabilities, human intentions, human secrets. At the door, he paused and looked back at the assembled traders, merchants, and travelers. Representatives from across the galaxy, all trying to understand what humanity really was and what it wanted. A young Sivrian called out from across the room. "Is it true what they say about humans?" David considered his answer. 6 weeks ago, he would have deflected the question or made a joke. Now, with the galaxy watching and waiting, he decided on honesty. "We prefer to be friendly," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. "It's better for everyone that way." As he walked out of the cantina, David could hear the conversations resuming behind him. But the tone was different now, respectful, cautious, the kind of tone used when discussing dangerous neighbors who might be reasonable if approached correctly. The galaxy had learned that humans were not what they appeared to be. Now it had to decide what to do with that knowledge. David headed back to his ship, knowing that his quiet life as a cargo pilot was over. But maybe, just maybe, that wasn't entirely a bad thing.